So, as most of the people that follow the Red Cross know, I'm back from my second trip in Haiti, and I I like to think about the compare and contrast from what happened and what I observed on my first trip versus what I saw during my second trip. During the first trip, the devastation was absolutely horrific, and the deceased were in the streets. There was rubble everywhere. But the most notable thing to me was the look on the faces of the Haitian people. Uh, in a word, they were depressed. They were walking around like zombies. No one smiled, and the city, which is 2.5 million people, was deathly quiet. No one was talking when they passed each other on the street. People were wandering aimlessly because they were afraid to get into buildings, and literally their shoulders were down and their faces were almost blank. And when I returned on my second trip, the devastation is still there. The buildings are still in rubble, but the streets were clean. Traffic was moving, and the signs of commerce and the reawakening of their fledgling economy were wherever you looked, you saw it. It reminded me of a persistent flower that just still could grow between the cracks of a sidewalk. And the people were passing each other in the street. They were saying bonjour, bonsoir. They were carrying goods on their heads. And the amazing thing is that every square inch of curb seemed to have a vendor station. And people were selling the most extraordinary stuff. Everything from a table the size of a TV table with apothecary items on it like Tylenol and toothpaste, to a person that had probably 3 arms width of goods, with things like armoires and wardrobes and mirrors and every kind of food you can imagine. Farming products, people were selling charcoal, and we even saw a little restaurant that was under a tarp that had one table and one fireplace, and they were cooking meals, and there was a couple in there in the restaurant. And the most notable thing on that trip is that people were smiling. They were smiling, there was laughter, people were walking with purpose, and all of this, I believe, is a testimony to the resiliency of the Haitian people. They are amazing. They're absolutely amazing. We went back to the camp that we were in the first place, and the conditions, as you would suspect, are still deplorable. The positive thing I could say is that when I was there the first time, people were using things like a piece of plastic and a stick. This time, the housing was more like tents, real tarps. Some were made out of corrugated metal, so you could actually stand under these temporary shelters, and so they were a little bit more substantive. I can tell you that what keeps me up in the middle of the night is the thought of our rainy season there. It's going to be terrible. And unfortunately, even if we started building more permanent shelter, and when I say we, I mean the whole community, government, the NGOs, etc., we would not have been able to house 1.3 million people in time for the rainy season. So our fervent hope is that we can get them as prepared as we can, which is one of the things the Red Cross knows how to do, and that's early warning systems, monitoring the storms, trying to help with drainage ditches and the like, to make sure that the area is healthy and that sanitation doesn't become an issue, but it's going to be a huge challenge. Having said all that, when I see what the Haitian people are capable of doing and how they rise up against adversity. They are tough, they are strong, they seem peaceful, and I really was inspired by the people that I saw. And the one mental image that I put in my mental scrapbook was the kids had taken the old pieces of plastic that they were using for temporary shelters, and they cut them into kites, and they were flying kites. And there was the sound of laughter. It was joyous, and I looked up at the sky and I saw those kites, and I thought, what an incredible place. So that's a bit of a picture into what Haiti is like. Since we returned, we are working feverishly to make sure that our portion of the cluster that was assigned to us is getting the food and the distribution that the people require. So the UN is coordinating all of this, and they are doing, in my opinion, an incredible job of making sure that the people of Haiti have food. So while I was on that trip, I got to see one of our distribution centers, and I got to see our base camp with all the coordination as to who's responsible for what. Since my return, I've been focusing a lot on coordination. And just today, we met a number of the NGOs that are members of a group called Interaction, which is a coordinator of the NGOs. We met to discuss things like environmental issues, shelters, health issues, gender issues, to make sure that we could tee up some of the challenges and start thinking about how to coordinate during the recovery period. There are an incredible number of people that are trying to do the right thing for the people of Haiti. They represent every single nonprofit organization that you could possibly imagine. There were people there also from USAID, from the World Bank, and there's a collective spirit in the air that we want to help the people of Haiti, and we want to help them be self-sufficient and make sure that when our operations are done and we pack up and go home, that there's a sustainable improvement, and one that can play into the Haitian economy and not fall apart after we all leave.